We're in Fredericksburg, Virginia with Bob Silkensen in his shop this morning. Bob, thanks for inviting us in to take a look around. Bob has been a member of Richmond Woodturners since 2009. If you know Bob at all, you'll know him from his basket illusion turnings. Bob has participated in show and tell quite regularly. He has given us a soup to nuts demonstration on his basket illusion turnings. He also has a couple of videos on our website. One of them is Rudy Olsnick style candlesticks, and one of them is about a tip for bowl bottoms. Bob, it's very easy to look at your turnings and say, this guy's been turning for a while, but you've only been a member since 2009. So when did you really start turning, and why did you get into turning?
That's a good question. I actually started turning, like a lot of people, in high school. That's the first time I got a taste of it. But then it was 28 years later before I actually had a lathe. My first lathe was a shopsmith, and I did a couple little things, but that was about it. So then I put that away for about 30 years until I retired. And at that time I bought a small pin turning jet 12-inch lathe and turned pins and pins and pins until I got sick of them. And then I started going into segmented wood turning, and from there went into rough turning and bowls and stuff, and that's about the time I got this larger jet lathe. And that's about the time I found Harvey Myers doing basket illusion. He's got several videos out there, and it just interests me to see the detail and the intricacy of what he does. So it kind of got me into that too.
You mentioned your jet lathe over here. Why a jet lathe, and what do you particularly like about it?
I guess one of the main reasons I got it is the first mini lathe I had was a jet, and that's I went to one of those woodworking shows up at Dulles at the Expo Center and turned a pin there. And of course they all had jets, so I needed a jet. So that was the first lathe, and I used that for maybe 3 years, make several hundred pins and whatever. And it was time that I wanted something a little bigger, a little more extension, a little more diameter. And so I just kind of migrated toward a jet. I didn't really look at anything else. I just seen the one I had was a good quality and worked well, so I went with this.
I see you've added a high intensity light. Have you done any other modifications to the lathe?
Well, sort of. I have this contraption back here, which is the depth finder for a bowl. You set it for your chuck, and then you can never actually go through the bottom. I can't really show you right now because of the vacuum chuck on here. The only other thing is I put lights everywhere because I can't see in it. This contraption here, another reason I like it is that you can move this light to a little platform down here and then shine it into your bowl so you can see what you're doing, instead of putting it on the bedways like I've seen a lot of people do. This one appears magnetic too, and I have put it down here, but that's got a little platform just for it.
If you had to replace the lathe, are there any features that you would want that you don't have, or change that you do have?
I would probably want to go 220 instead of 110. For the same amount of money and horsepower, you get a little more torque out of your machine.
So you tend to slow it down from time to time.
I can bog it down, get a good 5/8 inch bowl gouge on there, and I can bog it down, and I just back up and take smaller cuts. I'm not in a hurry, so I just back up and take smaller cuts.
Very important to change that you would make. Well, here we are in your shop, so if you would just kind of give us a tour of your shop, I would certainly appreciate it.
Okay, well, let's start in the middle. It's the table saw. It's a very old general saw made in China, but it served me well. I bought this and my jet dust collection at one of those woodworking shows up at Dulles one time, and put both these pieces in the back of my SUV at the time. So this is the workhorse. Then of course the lathe, and then with the lathe you have to have a bandsaw to cut your blanks. So I bought that. I actually drove up to Pennsylvania at the Grizzly factory and bought that on sale. What else we got in here? I got my sharpening system over here on the side with a little hobby drill press that doesn't really have much capacity. In fact, when I was doing pins, I couldn't set the pin blank up and drill with that. I had to drill them on the lathe I had at the time. Then I've got a 16-inch drum sander, thickness sander that I use quite a bit. And then going back over that way, I got a planer, a joiner, dust collection, chop saw. Somewhere over there I got a scroll saw, an Excalibur scroll saw.
So everything you need for round work and flat work.
Everything I need for round work and flat work. I can't think of anything else I need. If I need a hand tool or power tool, it's in a drawer or in a shelf somewhere. I used to do a lot of outside work for like decks and ramps and stuff like that for the community, and some of the tools I'd take for that.
Mm-hmm.
But
I see a sanding set behind you. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
oh yes, my sanding solution, I guess you say, is from Wood Turn Wonders. It's online, and it's this locking thing. Here I got my little power drill, and it's got a mandrel in it, and you do like that, and you can sand. You go to the next grit, put that up, put it in the hole, get the next grit. Now the reason I like that is you don't have to take the paper off and ruin the Velcro until the paper's dead. So, I mean, here it comes off and I have to change it, and I got extra paper down in through here, but you know, you don't go through a thing every time you use it. You don't go through a piece of sandpaper. And I have, this is a 3-inch, and then this is the 1.5 inch for the smaller sizes. And I've labeled them, and everything's great. And you can't quite see it from there, but each of these boxes is labeled with the grit that comes with it too. Okay? Now before I got this particular system, and I do still use it a lot, is the inertia sanders. Well, I made one for myself. I'll get the longer. It's just a piece of wood, and of course you get a round mandrel. It puts in there, and you can do it's got a magnet down at the bottom of the bushing, and so you can use your inertia sanding. And then I got one on the other end. You can go in flat and do it that way. Do your inertia sanding. Now, this was actually the second one I made. The first one I made, let me put this back. The first one I made was this thing. So it looks similar, use the same kind of handle, but this is an angle changer for a power drill. So I went to Harbor Freight and bought a whole bunch of bits with a hex end on them. And those fit right up in there. And I do the same with inertial sanding. I made all these little cone things myself. This is a poor man's system like that. So I had them all labeled. I had the grits on there. When I go to sand something, I'd set the grits out and just go through them the same way. Inertia, it's got the magnet in there. And these little things were real cheap. And of course the handle was scrappy. So I've gone through several iterations of trying to find what I think is the best way to sand. And right now I use that inertia sander and the power sander for all my bolts.
Very interesting. The tools on the wall, are those the only tools you use?
Now these are the most used tools. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 gouges, bowl gouges, and then several spindle gouges, and a pyramid tool and a couple other things. But these are the ones I use most often. You can't quite see it. Back on the other wall I have a lot of scrapers. I have a spindle roughing gouge, large scrapers, and those I use sometimes, and they're nice and flat so they go on that magnetic strip. Then also in a drawer over here I have specialty tools, like I got the Sorby spiral turner texturing tool. I've got some carbide tools of different companies, and beading tools I have over there, and maybe a little saw, cutoff Nope, don't have one over here, but the cut-off pointy ones, pointy ones. And yeah, I think that's all I have, is that drawer, that, and this.
I'm always interested in the jigs that people make for their shop. You've made your sanding jig. You've made your depth finder for your hollow forms or your deeper bowls. I'm sure with your basket illusion and your segmented, you've made other jigs. I'll be interested in looking at those.
Most of those are table saw sleds.
Okay.
Like there's a Sig Easy sled down there beside the bandsaw.
Yeah.
And then back behind the camera, I have a deep sink, and next to it, I have some of the bigger sleds I've made. One of them is called a Dubby from Inline Industries. A guy named Jerry Cole invented it. And for segmented stuff, you take however many pieces you want to put in a circle, say it's 12. So you take 12 into 180, and that's the angle you have to cut each wedge at. Well, trying to figure that out, I used to make it on the chop saw, and you have to figure it out. It's got the gauge on it, but it takes forever to get, maybe it's 12¼ degrees you have to cut something at. Well, the Dubby saw has a machined scale on one side. You put the arm up there to where it says 12, lock it down, cut your pieces, and they fit exactly. That's almost like the Sig Easy sled. You're basing it on something that was CNC'd, and you set it on that, and you get almost a perfect fit every time.
So you bought some and you've made some.
Yes.
I noticed a sharpening system over here. Can you tell me a little bit about what you use for sharpening your tools?
It's the one-way Wolverine system, and I set, I set it at a 40-degree angle for this. I bought this little Raptor thing that says 40. So when I do that, that's 40 degrees. It touches in 3 points. I have one for 50, but I almost never use it. Then I have the Wolverine thing, and I set my depth with exactly 1½ inches for the bowl gouge, and then put it in here and sharpen it. I do that for all my gouges, the small ones, big ones, spindle gouge, whatever I have, except for the Ellsworth bowl gouge I use the one that he sells. And it's almost identical, so I don't know what the difference is, but I use it.
I see a couple of CBN wheels. Why did you go to a CBN, and what grits do you use?
I believe this is an 80 and a 180. And why did I switch to CBN? Because everybody was doing it. I have the same white ones that came on it, and there was no reason they didn't work. They still give an edge, but this seems to, even the 180, you can get it up to 400, 500, 600, whatever. But even the 180 CBN seemed to me, give a better edge than the 220 white wheel I had. But I use this. This is, of course, part of the one-way system here. For scrapers, I bought this. I don't know if you've seen this. It's a Robo Rest. But you put that in the same thing, and you can set your angles. Like sometimes I'll actually write on the tool, this is sharpened at 45 degrees. So I'll set this and find 45, and that's how I'll sharpen it at that angle.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. I'm noticing this shop is awful clean. How do you control your dust and debris? I see a pipe on the wall to your right and something hanging from the ceiling behind you.
Okay.
How do you keep it clean?
Mainly with a broom and dustpan, but this is the dust collection system I bought, and I have a run to every major tool and a blast gate, and you can't really see them from here, but I have a blast gate for each little run. This is just a hose, which I run around and vacuum with. I have this one that I have these mag port things that Catherine Harris showed us. It goes on there and goes on the table saw, and that all gets collected and goes up in the air and goes over here to a big dust bag over in the corner. So that's, I don't know, 80–90% of the saw dust. Wood turning chips and stuff like that, I sweep up and put in a barrel, take it out in the woods and dump it. The other thing I have another vacuum over here to another saw and to my router table. Oh, and that thing there, this to hold down the dust a little bit. This shop is in my basement, and the other side of that wall is my wife's domain, and she doesn't like the dust out there. So anytime I'm doing something, I turn on this ventilation system to at least get most of the dust out of the air. And I can actually turn on this dust collection system and open a couple of vents that helps draw the dust out. If I'm doing sanding or something that's really creating a mess, I can turn on several different things to get a lot of it out of the air. And then as far as me, I use this AirTrend helmet mask. It's falling apart, I use it so much. I use it all the time. I have trouble breathing if I'm sanding down here, especially with certain types of woods, dark woods, seem to really give me a problem. So I use this every time I turn on a machine. Okay, one thing I wanted to mention while we were talking about lathe work was this extraneous, I don't even know what you call this thing, but you know when you buy a chuck, it comes with that little screw thing that you have to chuck it up in there, and then you drill a hole, and you start your bowl on that little screw thing. Well, back when I was really cheap, I only had one chuck, and I didn't want to buy another one, and this is about a third the cost of a chuck. So it's mainly just a screw, and it's threaded to fit on your lathe. So you start your bowl this way, put that on the chuck, and you start your bowl that way, make your tendon, turn the outside or whatever like that. And the bowl that you're just working on, maybe you're still finishing or sanding it and you didn't want to take it out of the chuck yet, you can leave it there and get your next one started this way. Now doing it this way, this hole is now threaded, so if I take it off, put it back on, it's going to be exactly where it was before. I don't have to worry about the chuck, being slightly off or anything like that to remount it. So I start all my bowls with this thing now.
And what's the name of the system again?
I wish I could remember what the name of it is. I bought it at Penn State, I think it was. But yeah, and it's got this angled piece. You can go on this way. If you have a small flat area, or if you have a larger flat area, you wanted to get a little more surface area against the bowl. So this is much larger than what your chuck would be when it's screwed in. So to me it's a good way to start. Some people start between centers, some people start lots of different ways, but that's what I do.
Well, thanks for sharing that. So Bob, your shop is like a U down here with a utility room in the center.
Yeah.
So your turning is down there, and it looks like your handiwork is on this end.
Yeah, this is assembly and stuff like that, small
Okay.
stuff.
And what's behind you?
A mess. This is one of the first things I built thinking I was going to store everything on these shelves, and they just became a collection area. Of course, this is where I keep my planer, my dust collector. I don't know if you can see that from here, but I have a chop saw and a joiner, and then I have clamps galore. I've got pieces of wood. This is about a third or a quarter of the small pieces I have in various places, kind of stuffed out of the way. Down on the floor I have, well, it used to be green. It was 5 years ago. I put some larger pieces down here that I don't know what to do with. I've got some round 4-inch oak pieces and maple pieces that I was always going to make a vase or a rolling pin or something like that. And then come around this way, I have a small desk I made. This is when I was going to do piercing and carving and whatnot like that. I have a high-speed piercer. I've got like a Fordham type machine. I've got Dremel. So I've got anything like that. I also do a little painting. Can't remember the guy's name. We took a class on his painting. But that's kind of what this one piece is waiting for me to get a inspiration on how to paint these. I've carved them out a little bit and I've painted it black, and now you're supposed to do dry brush painting. I've never done that either. This is another cabinet. Of course, this was a store-bought cabinet. Oh, I skipped my router table. This was a very expensive Jessen router table I bought with the elevator insert for the, I got a 2 horsepower router underneath there. I got an extra tall sacrificial fence here for doing long straight things. Of course it's on wheels, I can pull it out when I want to. It's got a dust collection port on the back. I can pull my small dust collector up to here. I got the store-bought thing. This is where I keep paints and solvents and materials like that. Of course up here there's epoxy and tape and whatnot. And then if I got closer over that way, there's an Excalibur scroll saw there. I've done a lot of scroll work and intarsia work, small stuff like that. I have enjoyed doing it, and that's kind of set up for that. Now over on this side, it's just a work area. Assembly for parts. I do most of my segmented rings here, like this was a segmented ring I did on this. Of course, to do that, I skipped the spot back here. To make rings, you have to clamp them together. So I've got large rings, small rings, intermediate ring clamps, not rings, these are clamps, and these are all pretty much the same size, so you can put the tail of one into the head of the other and make it as big as you want. So I've gotten a whole collection of those for rings. While I'm talking about rings, there's something I wanted to talk about back on the lathe. Back when I had my shopsmith lathe, the one thing I loved about it was a 12-inch sanding wheel, or whatever you call it, sanding disc. So first thing I did when I got my big jet lathe was put a faceplate on a MDF board and made a 12-inch circle where I can buy this pressure-sensitive sanding disc and put that up there. And the reason that's important is when you make a ring and you glue it together, it's almost impossible to get every piece exactly flat to glue it on your bowl. If this is your bowl and you want to glue that on there, this has to be flat and this has to be flat. So if that's on the lathe, I have a piece of oak with sandpaper glued to it. I just put on a fence like that and spin it and get that flat. Well, it's on the thing. But your piece like this, how do you flatten this one edge? Some people have a drum sander and run it through a drum sander. I've broken several of them trying to do that. I don't like doing it that way. First thing I did when I started doing this is I have a piece of sandpaper glued to a 3/4 inch plywood, and I do it by hand. And I'd sand like this until I got it down. But then I had this thing, while that's on the lathe, you just take this and push it up against the lathe, and that flattens this edge. You can get that just as flat as any other thing else, anything you have. And then when you go to put this on the bowl, you get flat against flat, and all you have to do is line up your joints.
So your lathe becomes a 12-inch disc sander.
The lathe becomes a 12-inch disc sander, and if you flip this around on the tailstock, this becomes the vise, or the clamp to push that against there to hold it on. So, and then when you're done, you start over, sand this side and make another ring, sand that side. Okay.
So this area that you're standing at now seems to be where the art takes place.
This is where the assembly takes place anyhow, yeah. There's all sorts of little things. This is down here because I have to redo the finish because it's still sticky and it won't dry. There's other things I've thought about. I got small bowls I played with. I got funnels I played with. So this is where parts go to die too. What else haven't we talked about?
Well, this has been a great tour. I have two remaining questions, if you don't mind.
Okay.
First of all, the basket illusion takes an awful lot of time. It's very tedious. You have to be exact. So after everything's been turned and lined and ready to go, where is the overstuffed chair, the large screen TV, and the entertainment system that you probably use while you're doing all of that?
Well, this is the chair I use, but I have a desk behind you that has my pyrography and all my ink pens and all that kind of over into the nicer area of the basement. I don't do it here in the shop. But I could use this desk, but I have a different desk out there I use.
Okay. Then my other question is, I know that you have been turning a long time and you sell your turnings. And I'm very curious about how do you establish the price and how do you advertise? How do you go about showing your pieces? Is there a way to display them? Can you give me any idea if I want to start selling my pieces where I might start?
That's a tough one, because when I started, I was doing pins. I wanted to sell pins. Of course, if you don't go to a craft show, you're not going to sell many pins to your friends and family. They want gifts. So I gave away dozens and dozens and dozens of pins, and somebody told me about a Bealtown wine festival. So I thought, man, this is going to be great. I could sell bottle stoppers and put up some pins, maybe sell a few pins, take a few bowls. So I loaded up everything, made myself about another 50 bottle stoppers, and paid for the entry fee, and I bought a tent and drove down to Bealton and set up and sat there all day, sold one bottle stopper. So I wasn't happy with, quote, craft fairs. So there's two places I try to sell. Here in Fredericksburg, we have something called the Whiskey and Wood Art Festival. It's in a whiskey distillery over here in town, and it's put on by the Woodworkers Guild in Fredericksburg, and it's all just woodworkers. So I take all my bowls and stuff like that over there, and I can usually sell a couple pieces, as long as I don't put too high price on them. The other place I sell, well, when you get to other people, they'll tell you other things too, but there's this one place up in Millbury, Virginia, I sell, called the Old Mill, and they put on an Art at the Mill show, spring and fall, and they'll let you submit 7 items on one $35 entry fee. But the people that come there looking for art, they want something nice. They want something that you've spent some time doing, something intricate, something with a perfect finish. They don't want to see tool marks. They don't want to see a bad sanding job. They don't want to see if you're going to have natural edge. It should be a nice looking natural edge. And you can put a premium price tag on it. You can make some money.
Could you show me a couple of pieces and how you go about it?
Okay, I have a few pieces I brought. I have kind of a high end and a low end. I'm not sure how much you'd call this low end, but this is things that just about anybody can do. It's a simple bowl. It's a natural edge bowl, both of these. This one's, I think that's spalted maple, and this is called Japanese elm. But people love this natural edge, and you can sell something like this for, I don't know, $60, $70. Not too bad, maybe $30 to $50 on something like this. So if you want to do, I don't want to say craft show type items, but lower end, put a nice finish on it, you can get a little bit of money on it. If you really want to spend some money, or if you really want to spend the time making something, you can do something like this. This is a 3rd generation lamination segmented bowl. So I did this in December of 2012. So all these little pieces, they look like separate pieces of wood, and what it is, you laminate some pieces together, cut it at an angle, flip every other piece and glue it back together. After you glue it back together, you put it back and you cut it at another angle. You flip every other piece, glue it back together. So you do that 3 times and you come up with this funny looking design here, and then you have to glue it all together like a regular segmented vase. So this is, I believe that's sapelli, maple, walnut, sapelli, and walnut. And for being 10 years old, I don't see a single crack or anything on this. So something that you've spent this much time on, take up to an art show, a place where people are looking for art, and you could get between $400 or $500 for something like that. And the same, this is a basket illusion bowl. Actually was a segmented vase I made just out of plain maple, and then I did the beading and design work separately. And people really like the intricate work on that, and that's something, even this size, I could sell for $400 up at an art show. I have a couple upstairs that I could probably sell for even more than that, if I could find the right show. If you could drive to New York City and get in one of those art shows, you could really ask a pretty penny. But in general, most people do something like this, or something like this. You can get maybe 20 bucks for a little tiny bowl like that, put a nice finish on it. That's really important. You got to have a finish that people can pick up and feel how soft it is.
Well, that really helps. I appreciate knowing that. Bob, I have been very impressed with your shop. I appreciate you taking the time to be with us. If people want to ask you questions, do you mind if we share your contact information?
No, that's quite all right.
Well,
Email or phone.
Bob Silkensen's phone number is on the membership list, if you have the membership list, and you can reach him via email at bsilk, that's B-S-I-L-K, at cox.net, I believe it is. And again, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure seeing your show.
Thank you.